Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's BDF44 coming at you with another video as always. So right now I'm just sitting around listening to ESPN as always, doing my little workout as always, and I'm just thinking about how exciting this offseason has been just as a whole, um, for my Lakers, for the Clippers, for Philadelphia. Philly is the team that came up, excuse me, in terms of what kind of stuck out. Looking at their salary, they've spent over $500 million on free agents this year. Signing Ben Simmons, obviously taking on Josh Richardson's contract from the Heat, Al Horford, Tobias Harris. All of these people have been paid. I don't like what they have in terms of getting the most out of the money that they've paid for. Now, this year should be a good year for the Philadelphia 76ers. In fact, as of right now, I got them coming out of the East. Of course, it's too early to really know what's going to happen. I think seeding is going to have a lot to do with what takes place this season just in general. But right now, just early on, looking at who's on paper in the Eastern Conference, I think Philadelphia looks the strongest. But over time, when those contracts start to take shape and years pass on, I think most of those contracts are good through at least 2023. Some of those 2024. Who is Al Horford going to be 3 years from now? Is Tobias Harris really a player that you pay $180 million to? Like, I like those guys right now, and I like what the Philadelphia 76ers team could put together right now. As I said, if these were 2-year contracts, even for the same dollar amount, I'd be cool. But to give them the length and to give all of them that length, you cap yourself so far out the game that you don't really have the supporting cast that they need to really maximize what it is that they're bringing to the table. The shooting was already something that was questionable in the past, and now they've lost not only one but two big-time shooters, in my opinion, and Landry Shamet when they traded him mid-season in the Tobias Harris trade, and also obviously J.J. Redick, who signed with the Pelicans this past summer. So what is it that they're lining up down there that's going to help those big-time contracts succeed? What's on their bench? I'd have to take a look and really see, but right now I can't imagine they can get a whole lot better from here. I just don't know what they're thinking. Guys are going to be coming up for contracts. A guy like Joel Embiid, even though he's under contract, his money's going to need to be taken care of going forward. When free agency comes around and he looks at these guys making all this money and he doesn't see a championship to show for it, which is what will likely take place because I don't see them beating anybody coming out of the West. What's keeping him from going West himself? What's keeping him from going to New York? What's keeping him from taking a look at some teams outside of where you're at, Philly? I mean, like, you just cap yourself completely out of the game and you make it so that you're taking on contracts that are not going to be really movable in the future. Are you really going to be able to move Al Horford's contract 2 years from now? You confident you're going to be able to do that without attaching picks? Same thing with Tobias Harris. Ben Simmons, you give him $180 million. If he doesn't develop a jump shot, you do understand that you have a problem, right? Like, if he continues to trot out there and be the same way that he's been for the last 3 years, you're still going to have some of the same issues because you're lacking shooting. So I just don't understand. Like, I like Philly short term. I don't want to get off that. I like them short term because they're big. And when you have that kind of size, it can make it so that you can just wear teams down just in general. So I like that. But TJ McConnell's gone. Like, you've lost a lot of the key players that made your team what it was and made it so that your pieces were as effective as they were. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about Philly. I just wanted to touch in on what I saw there, and it's kind of, I have a shake my head kind of feeling about that situation. Like, no, that all of that is going to be stuff that you're going to have to work around later on. Yeah, they may help you right now, but those are headaches. Not potential headaches, certifiable headaches down the pipeline. So I just don't understand why teams set themselves up like that. Same thing with the Thunder. I look at that, even though they've acquired picks in regards to getting Chris Paul, now it's like, well, those are some very expensive picks. That's what I say. Even though I've made a video about this already, it's further settling in that they're having trouble moving Chris Paul. It's like, of course you're having trouble moving Chris Paul. You were the only team interested in Chris Paul besides the Heat. And why would the Heat not make that deal and allow you to take on Chris Paul's contract themselves? Why would it even get to a point where they now want to do business with you after not relinquishing assets in order to acquire Chris Paul in the first place from the Rockets? Why would they turn around and do business with you? So it's like you inherited an impossible problem. And the only reason why it was possible for the Houston Rockets to fix it is because they found someone like yourself who couldn't see it as an impossible problem. And now, was valuing picks over how best to handle a massive contract. What we're talking about is whatever the duration of Chris Paul's contract is exactly what they've paid for the picks that they got with him. Russell Westbrook was a player that they, in theory, probably should have held on to, because he had more trade value than Chris Paul could ever have at this stage in the game. And even though his contract's more massive, and he would have been happy with the trade, he was also a legacy player who had his heart wrapped up in your fan base. So you're more likely to keep him happy by himself, especially with his high usage rate, than you are trying to keep happy a Chris Paul who, very obviously has always needed help in order to win. I just don't think it's going to be easy to stretch that contract. Obviously, it's going to cost a lot. And it seems to be impossible to trade that contract because everybody knows better than to trade for a bad contract except for you. So at this point in time, it's like, why would anybody do so? Why don't they just wait for you to stretch him, which is inevitably what you're going to have to do because no one will trade for him. CJ, Sam Presti and the Thunder, I know they wanted to hoard picks, but this Chris Paul contract is taking up half of your cap. If you can't get rid of it, you're just going to have an unhappy superstar on your hands. And that circumstance is going to make it so that other people aren't going to want to come there anyway. I mean, it's like you're pouring salt on a wound. Basically, is how I'm looking at that. Like, you already believe you're going to have problems keeping people because you've signed people and they still haven't stayed. You've had 3 of the best players of the decade and you weren't able to keep any of them. It's obvious you're not willing to really pay anybody that in terms of going forward. You don't really want to just take on bad contracts. You didn't trade for a player like Bradley Beal or something like that. So I'm saying to myself, well, you're going to the complete seller. Couldn't you have done that with Russell Westbrook and 12 picks or whatever it would have been? I mean, I know they got some picks out of the Rockets, but it seems like they inherited more problems than what those picks will ultimately be worth, unless they flip the picks now. So, and I don't think that they do that. I don't think that they see it that way as that being their best solution. So we'll see. I just feel like the Thunder have really put themselves in a really strange hole, opposite of like a Washington Wizards, or the opposite of what the Rockets currently have, which is being over the cap. Now these guys are not necessarily over the cap at all, but they don't have any talent outside of Chris Paul, who's taken up half of the cap. So it's just it's an awful situation, and it didn't have to be. It really didn't have to be. That's the way I see it. As soon as you lose Paul George, you inherit the ability to acquire someone who has max potential or max money on their books. That's why I always say Bradley Beal, and some would say, well, Bradley Beal, what would you give up to get Bradley Beal? Well, you give up the picks that you ultimately have acquired in these trades that you've made, sans the Russell Westbrook deal that doesn't get done. You keep him, you still have 10 picks? Throw some of those at the Washington Wizards. That's what you do. You throw Dennis Schroeder at the Washington Wizards since they obviously need a point guard on top of everything. And that's how you get Bradley Beal. I'm not saying that would do it, but you add a third team if you need to and attach more picks, whatever you got to do to keep Russell Westbrook in a position where he can at least compete. You give him a duo. that he doesn't have to leave the city to have. That was the type of outside of the box thinking that I look for from GMs that I don't often see. A lot of times they just are quick to throw talent away without really considering what the talent is actually worth. Letting people walk out of the door for nothing, stuff like that. It just serves their fan base poorly, and gives them no opportunity to gain respect around the league. So I know it's not easy, especially when you're managing a small market team. I know it's not easy when you're trying to keep superstars happy, young superstars at that, who have a high price tag and a high demand around the league. A guy like Ben Simmons, it's hard to keep him happy. You got to pay him early. I get it, but as was mentioned earlier on ESPN, I don't remember who said it, so I don't want to misquote them, but they were basically saying it can go one of two ways. Either you can have a $100 million contract to a kid and he turn out like Giannis, or you can hand a $100 million contract to a kid and he can end up like Wiggins. It's a gamble, so not one I would recommend. I would much rather see a player develop before giving him everything that he can get for developing. A lot of times we just let the market dictate the price, and sometimes the kids don't ever really reach their potential because they get the goals, they get the fruit of reaching their potential without actually putting in the work and doing so. So it's like, I don't believe in rewarding people for mediocrity or giving them the big reward for only half the work. So that's my opinion. I'm not trying to pocket watch, but at the same time, when you're dealing with a limited amount of money that you can divvy to others in order to make a basketball team, you got to do it wisely. And so, yep, that's what I got to say. Hopefully it works out for the Philadelphia 76ers. Hopefully the Thunder don't continue to suffer, because, boy, do they have a very grueling history at this point in their tenure. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say. Hope everybody's enjoying themselves. BDF 44. Peace.